open your eyes and you do not know where you are.
The ceiling is close, closer than you are used to. It is concrete, or something like concrete, darkened with years of oil lamp smoke. A crack runs across it, and through the crack something is growing, some tiny opportunist plant that found its way in from the roof. The light is dim, orange, shifting. A single clay lamp on a ledge, burning olive oil, filling the room with a smell that will become, over the course of this day, the background frequency of your life. Everything in Rome smells faintly of olive oil. The food, the lamps, the skin, the hair. It is the petroleum of the ancient world, and you are soaking in it.
You sit up. The bed is a wooden frame with rope webbing and a thin mattress stuffed with wool, if you are lucky. Straw if you are not. The room is small, perhaps 3 meters by 4. There is a chest, a stool, a shelf with a few clay vessels, and a chamber pot in the corner that you will be dealing with shortly, in a way that will recalibrate your relationship with the concept of plumbing forever.
Through a window. Not glass. There is no glass in apartments like this. It is a small square opening with a wooden shutter. The city announces itself. The sound hits you like weather. Wagon wheels grinding on stone. The clang of a coppersmith already at work before dawn. Voices. Hundreds of voices, maybe thousands, layered and compressed by narrow streets into a single roar of Latin and Greek and languages you cannot place. A donkey protests somewhere below. Someone is singing. Someone else is arguing about money. A child shrieks, playing or crying. You cannot tell, and neither can anyone else, and nobody checks.
Welcome to Rome. The year is, let us say, 100 AD, give or take a decade either side of the Emperor Trajan. The empire is at its territorial peak. The legions hold a line from Scotland to the Sahara, from Portugal to Mesopotamia. The city itself holds somewhere between 1 and 1.5 million people, a population that no European city will match again until London in the 1800s. It is the largest, richest, loudest, most sophisticated, most dangerous city on Earth.
And you live on the 3rd floor of an insula.
The insula. The word means island, because each block sits like an island in a sea of streets. Is Rome's answer to a problem that every great city faces. Too many people, not enough ground. The solution then as now is to build upward. Roman insulae are apartment blocks, 5, 6, sometimes 7 stories of concrete and timber framing, built by speculative developers on the cheapest materials that would pass inspection, and sometimes on materials that would not. The poet Juvenal, writing around exactly this period, complains that the buildings of Rome are held together with prayers and plaster, and that they collapse with a regularity that the residents have learned to factor into their lives the way other people factor in weather.
Your floor, the 3rd, is the Roman middle class, which is to say, survivable. The ground floor is commercial space, shops, taverns, workshops, their shutters opening directly onto the street. The 1st and 2nd floors are the most desirable residential levels. Larger rooms, sturdier construction, occasionally even running water piped from the aqueducts. As you go higher, the apartments shrink, the ceilings lower, the construction thins, and the rent drops. The 5th and 6th floors are for the poorest. Single rooms, shared by families, with walls you can hear through, and floors you can feel flex under your feet. And above them sometimes, the illegal 7th floor, an afterthought of timber and ambition that the building codes technically forbid, and the landlords build anyway, because demand is demand and enforcement is negotiable.
The landlord, and your landlord, is worth a moment's attention because he is one of Rome's most characteristic figures. is almost certainly not a person you will ever meet. He is a member of the equestrian class, or a senator investing through a proxy, or a freedman who has converted his savings into property, and he owns this building the way a modern investor owns a stock, as a number on a ledger managed by a procurator, maintained as little as the tenants will tolerate, and valued for the rent it produces rather than the lives it contains. Cicero, who owned multiple rental properties, writes to his friend Atticus that 2 of his insulae have collapsed and several others have developed cracks, and that even the mice have moved out, and his tone is one of mild financial annoyance rather than horror. The buildings are investments. The tenants are revenue. The relationship between the two is mediated entirely by money, and the result is a housing stock that ranges from the decent to the lethal, with the market setting the boundary rather than the building code.
The rent. Merce's is due on the 1st of July once a year, and the amount is significant. A small third-floor room like yours cost perhaps 2,000 sesterces per year, roughly twice the annual grain doles, and a substantial fraction of a laborer's income. Failure to pay means eviction, and eviction in Rome means the streets, because there is no social housing, no safety net beyond the patron's handout and the grain dole, and no legal protection for the tenant against the landlord's right to reclaim his property. The anxiety of rent day is a constant in Roman literature. The poets write about it, the satirists joke about it, and the jurists devote careful attention to the legal mechanics of throwing people out of their homes. July the 1st in Rome is not a celebration. It is a reckoning.
No one on the upper floors has running water. No one has a toilet. No one has a kitchen. Open flames above the second floor are either forbidden or suicidally risky. The construction is too flammable. This means that your morning begins with 3 problems that will shape everything about your day. You need to get rid of last night's waste. You need to get clean, and you need to eat. And none of these things can happen inside your apartment.
The chamber pot comes first.
You have 2 options, and both of them are educational. Option 1. Carry the pot downstairs through the stairwell, which is dark, narrow, unlit, shared with every other tenant on your side of the building, and features stairs that the satirists describe as a popsicle course of chamber pots, sleeping drunks, and the occasional feral cat, and empty it into the large clay vessel sunk into the pavement at the base of the building. This vessel, the dolium, is collected periodically by the fullers, the laundry workers, who use the aged urine as a cleaning agent for cloth. Your waste has economic value. The Emperor Vespasian, 1 generation before your morning, famously taxed the urine trade, and when his son objected to the indignity, held up a coin and asked, "Does it smell?" Money in Rome has literally been laundered.
Option 2. The window the law forbids it. The law has always forbidden it. The jurist Ulpian carefully delineates the liability. If you dump waste from an upper floor and hit a passerby, you owe damages. If the passerby dies, the penalty is severe. And yet the poets, the satirists, the legal commentaries themselves, by the sheer volume of their complaints, confirm that the law is honored impressively often in the breach. Juvenal advises anyone walking through Rome at night to make a will before leaving the house, not because of muggers, but because of the rain from above. The streets of Rome after dark are an open sewer from the sky.
You take the stairs.
Pause in the stairwell, though, because the stairwell teaches you something about Rome that the history books skip. This building is alive with people you will never fully know.
Behind the door on the second floor, a freedman, a former slave, who now runs a pottery workshop on the ground floor and has bought the lease on 2 apartments, one for his family, one rented out for income. His wife weaves wool in their front room, a loom clacking from dawn. His son, 12 years old, is apprenticed to a scribe and will never carry a chamber pot again if the father has anything to say about it. The ambition of freedmen is one of Rome's engines, mocked by the satirists, resented by the old families, and utterly unstoppable. Trimalchio, the fictional freedman of Petronius's Satyricon, throws banquets of grotesque excess and brags about his wealth with a candor that makes senators wince. And the joke works because Trimalchio is not rare. He is a type. The man who was property and is now proprietor, and who intends for his children to forget both chapters.
Across the landing, a woman who lives alone, a widow, or never married or divorced, because divorce in Rome is as easy as a letter and as common as rain. She works as a midwife, an obstetrix, one of the few medical professions open to women and one of the most dangerous. She delivers babies in apartments like this one, by lamplight, with equipment that is competent and knowledge that is sometimes lethal. The treatments for complications include herbal pessaries, manual rotation, and prayer in that order. When things go wrong, they go very wrong. She loses mothers. She loses children. She carries on because the city produces babies at a rate that guarantees her employment and her nightmares in roughly equal measure.
And above you on the 4th floor, sharing a single room, 3 men from Antioch who work the docks at the Emporium, unloading grain ships for wages that would insult a mule. They speak Greek among themselves and enough Latin to follow orders. They eat at the Thermopolium because they cannot cook. They send money home. They have been in Rome for 2 years, and they have seen the Colosseum from the outside and the inside of their room and the route between them and almost nothing else. They are Rome too. Rome is more immigrant than native, more Greek-speaking than anyone admits, more dependent on the labor of people from everywhere else than any triumphal arch suggests.
Downstairs, you step out of the building and into the morning, and the morning is an assault.
The street is narrow, 3 meters wide, maybe 4. The buildings on either side rise 5 and 6 stories, blocking most of the sky. The paving stones are basalt, dark volcanic rock, fitted tightly but uneven, worn smooth in the center by centuries of feet. There are no sidewalks in the modern sense. Raised stepping stones cross the street at intervals, allowing pedestrians to hop over the stream of water, waste, and runoff that flows perpetually down the center of the road toward the nearest drain. The drainage system of Rome is, by ancient standards, extraordinary. The Cloaca Maxima, the Great Sewer, has been running since the 6th century BC. But the last mile problem is eternal. The drains are down there, and your apartment is up here, and in between is gravity and indifference. The smell is the thing no reconstruction captures. Layer it, olive oil, wood smoke, bread baking, urine from the fooleries, dung from the pack animals, fish sauce, garum, the universal Roman condiment, fermented in open vats at the city's edge, but carried in jars through every street, incense from a shrine on the corner, roasting meat from a thermopolium, and underneath it all, the permanent base note of a city of 1 million people, and an unknowable number of animals sharing a water supply that is magnificent by ancient standards and terrifying by modern ones.
You are hungry.
You are always hungry in the morning in Rome because you cannot cook.
Breakfast is a transaction conducted standing up at a counter in the street. The thermopolium, the Roman fast food counter, the ancestor of every takeaway window on Earth, is built into the ground floor of an insula, its marble counter facing the street, its surface pierced by round holes into which clay pots of hot food are sunk. There are roughly 300 thermopolia so far excavated in Pompeii alone, which was a town of perhaps 15,000 people. In Rome, a city 100 times larger, they must have numbered in the thousands. They are everywhere, on every block, because the majority of Romans cannot cook at home, and the city has, with the ruthless ingenuity of all great cities, turned that limitation into an industry.
You eat standing at the counter. Bread, coarse, dark, heavy, dipped in olive oil or wine, perhaps a handful of olives, perhaps a bowl of wheat porridge with a pour of honey. If you have money, an egg, or a sausage, or a slice of cheese. The portions are small, the calories are modest, and the meal takes 5 minutes. Linger at the counter a moment longer, because the thermopolium is a small museum of Roman daily economics, and the evidence is in the walls.
Many thermopolia, and Pompeii's excavated examples show this vividly, have painted signs on their exterior walls. Images of the food they serve, price lists, and sometimes murals depicting cheerful scenes of drinking and dining, or explicit advertisements of other services available in the back rooms. The painted menus are the world's first fast food branding, and they work for a population that is only partially literate. The images sell what the words cannot. Inside, the counter's sunken pots hold the day's offerings: a stew of lentils and pork, a dish of chickpeas and garum, a pot of heated wine. The thermopolium at the corner of the Insula of the chaste lovers in Pompeii was found with its last meal still in the pots. Duck, goat, fish, snails, sealed by the ash of Vesuvius at the moment the cook walked away. 2,000 years later, the menu is still legible in the bones.
The money you leave on the counter deserves a word. Roman currency is, by ancient standards, spectacularly sophisticated. A decimal system of bronze, silver, and gold coins minted across the empire, stamped with the emperor's portrait and propaganda messages that update with every regime. The as is your smallest practical coin. The sestertius, 4 asses, is the standard unit of everyday pricing. The denarius, 16 asses, is a day's wage for a common laborer. Prices are carved into walls, painted on signs, and argued about in every market. A loaf of bread costs roughly 2 asses, a liter of cheap wine about the same, a visit to the baths a quarter of an as. A modestly comfortable life in Rome. Food, rent, bathhouse, the occasional evening at the tavern. Requires an income of perhaps 800 to 1,000 sesterces a year. A senator's minimum qualifying wealth is 1 million sesterces. The gap between those two numbers is the gap between the 3rd floor and the hilltop villa, between the thermopolium counter and the formal dinner couch, between the city as most people live it and the city as the historians remember it.
Because here is a thing about Rome that will shape your entire day. The traffic law. Julius Caesar, half a century before your morning, banned wheeled vehicles from the streets of Rome during daylight hours, with exceptions for construction materials, religious processions, and triumphal parades. The ban was practical. The streets are too narrow for both pedestrians and carts, and the population is too large to share. The result is that Rome by day is a pedestrian city, dense, loud, shoulder to shoulder, and Rome by night is a cargo city, an industrial zone of creaking wheels and shouting drivers that makes sleep on the upper floors of the Insula a matter of exhaustion rather than peace.
Seneca, writing from his apartment above a bathhouse, catalogues the noises that reach him. The grunting of weightlifters, the slap of the masseur's hand, the splashing of the show-off who likes the sound of his own diving, the sausage seller's cry, the cake seller's cry, and every other kind of vendor with his own distinctive yell. And that is the daytime. At night, Martial complains, there is no hour in Rome at which you can sleep. The teachers shout before dawn, the bakers hammers through the small hours, the coppersmiths all day. If you are a light sleeper, he says, you must leave Rome entirely. Rome itself is the noise, and the noise is Rome, and they are not separable. One more current runs through every Roman street, and it is as invisible and as constant as the water in the drains. Religion, or rather, religions, plural, in a tangle that makes the modern concept of religious identity look tidy. Rome is not monotheistic, and it is not even coherently polytheistic. It is omnitheistic, absorbing every god it encounters, filing them alongside the existing collection, and worrying not about belief, but about practice. You do not need to believe Jupiter exists. You need to perform the correct rituals at the correct times, because religion in Rome is a transaction. Do you des, I give so that you may give, and the gods are partners in a contract, not objects of faith. The result is a city layered with worship like geological strata. The old Roman gods at the base, the Greek gods mapped onto them, the Egyptian gods of Isis and Serapis imported and fashionable, the Persian god Mithras worshipped in underground chambers by soldiers and merchants, the Jewish community in Trastevere practicing its singular monotheism in a city of 10,000 deities, and arriving quietly, noticed by almost no one in your century, the followers of a recently executed Jewish preacher from Palestine, meeting in private houses and catacombs, practicing a religion that will eventually swallow the empire whole.
The small shrine on your street corner, the lararium, with its painted snakes and its tiny altar, receives offerings every morning. A splash of wine, a pinch of incense, a prayer muttered by the baker on his way to work. The offering is not grand. It is not emotional. It is maintenance, the spiritual equivalent of oiling a hinge. The gods of the crossroads protect the crossroads. The lares of the household protect the household. The genius of the emperor protects the state. Keep them fed, keep them noticed, and the machinery runs. Neglect them, and the machinery fails in ways that are unpredictable and personal. A sick child, a collapsed wall, a fire that starts in the night. Superstition and engineering exist side by side in Rome without any sense of contradiction, because the Romans do not experience them as contradictions. The aqueduct delivers water by gravity. The prayer delivers safety by reciprocity. Both are technologies. Both require maintenance. Both work, as far as anyone can tell.
You have eaten, the sun is climbing. Now comes the part of the day that defines your social existence in Rome, and it is unlike anything in the modern world. You go to visit your patron.
The patronage system is the invisible scaffolding of Roman life. Nearly every Roman who is not independently wealthy, and most who are, exists in a web of relationships between patron and client. Your patron is a man of higher social standing, perhaps a senator, perhaps a wealthy businessman, perhaps simply someone one rung above you on a very long ladder. Every morning, you go to his house. You wait in the atrium, along with dozens, sometimes hundreds, of other clients, for the salutatio, the morning greeting. You are dressed in your toga, because formal dress
is required, and the toga is the most uncomfortable garment ever designed by a civilization that prided itself on engineering. 6 meters of heavy wool, draped in precise folds that require practice to achieve and constant vigilance to maintain, in a climate that is already warm by 7 in the morning for 6 months of the year. You sweat inside your toga while waiting in line to say good morning to a man who may or may not remember your name.
In return for this ritual humiliation, you receive your sportula, a small basket of food, or its cash equivalent, 6¼ sesterces by convention. This is not charity, it is the operating system. Your patron needs clients. Their number is his social proof. Their votes are his political capital. Their presence at his dinner table is his prestige. You need his food, his connections, his legal protection, his recommendation for work. The relationship is transactional, hierarchical, and permanent. You will be here tomorrow morning, and the morning after, and every morning until one of you dies. The poet Martial, himself a client, describes the life with bitter comedy, rising before dawn, crossing the city in the dark, waiting in a crowded hallway, receiving a pittance, and going home to do nothing, because the morning visit has consumed the productive hours and left you too tired and too broke for anything ambitious.
After the salutatio, the city opens around you, and what it offers depends entirely on what you are.
If you are a free Roman citizen, and roughly half the city's population is not, you are entitled to the grain dole. Since the late Republic, the state has distributed free grain to qualifying citizens, 5 modii per month, roughly 35 kilograms of wheat, enough to feed one person. Augustus reorganized the system. By your time, around 200,000 citizens receive it. You collect it monthly at one of the distribution points, present your tessera, your ration token, a small wooden or bronze tablet, and carry home enough grain to keep you alive, if not comfortable. The dole does not include oil, wine, meat, or vegetables. It does not feed your family unless they have their own tokens, and it does not replace the need to work. But it means that no citizen of Rome starves, which is extraordinary by any ancient standard, and more than a few modern ones.
Follow the grain from the dole point backward, because the supply chain that feeds Rome is one of the most extraordinary logistical achievements in history, and one of the most fragile.
The grain comes from Egypt, from North Africa, from Sicily, from Sardinia, shipped in bulk across the Mediterranean in cargo vessels that can carry up to 1,000 tons, the supertankers of the ancient world. The fleet converges on Ostia and Portus, Rome's twin port cities at the mouth of the Tiber, where the grain is transferred to river barges and hauled upstream to the Emporium on the Aventine. The 3 men from Antioch on your 4th floor work this route, unloading sacks in the pre-dawn dark. The Annona, the grain administration, is one of the largest bureaucracies in the empire, employing thousands of officials, inspectors, measurers, and accountants to ensure that the supply never fails. Because if the supply fails, Rome riots. The city has no reserves worth mentioning, perhaps 60 days' supply at best, and a population of 1 million people who have been promised by the state that they will eat. The promise is political dynamite. Every emperor knows that his throne rests, ultimately, not on the legions, but on the grain ships. Lose Egypt, and you lose Rome within the season.
The terror of the grain supply haunts the political class the way nuclear deterrence haunts the modern one, an existential dependency that everyone acknowledges and no one can resolve. Egypt is a single province, a single river, a single flood cycle,
A bad Nile flood means a bad harvest, means a bad year in Rome, means crowds in the streets and fire in the granaries. Claudius built the harbor at Portus specifically to reduce the bottleneck. Trajan expanded it. The infrastructure is massive, expensive, and never quite sufficient, because the problem is not engineering. Roman engineering can solve anything but geography. Rome is a city of 1 million people living 200 miles from the nearest productive farmland, fed entirely by sea, and the sea has storms and pirates and the wrong season. Every loaf of bread on every thermopolium counter represents a logistical miracle that the person eating it never thinks about, the way you never think about the electrical grid until it fails. If you work, and most people work, the economy around you is a roaring, clattering, sweating machine of making and selling and carrying and building. Step into any street and count the trades. The bakers with their stone mills turned by blindfolded donkeys, grinding grain into flour in a process so dusty that the Bakers' Guild is associated with lung disease. The fullers, stamping cloth in vats of urine and fuller's earth, their legs stained permanently yellow. The tanners at the city's edge, because no neighborhood will tolerate them closer, processing hides with a cocktail of dung and brains that produces leather and an odor that carries for blocks. The butchers, the fishmongers, selling from baskets that drip into the street. The potters, the glassblowers, a recent innovation, and a Roman specialty that will not be matched again for centuries. The jewelers, the wig makers, the copyists, hand-duplicating books, scroll by scroll for the bookshops in the Argulatum. The architects and their crews, building and rebuilding a city that is perpetually under construction. Cranes and scaffolding everywhere, slave gangs hauling travertine blocks, the sound of chisels from dawn to dusk.
And the slaves. This is the thing, the tourist version of Rome leads. The thing you cannot not see once you are standing in the street. A substantial fraction of every person you pass is property. Estimates vary. The numbers are genuinely uncertain. But something like 1/4 to 1/3 of the population of Roman Italy is enslaved. They do everything. They build the buildings, cook the food, clean the houses, tutor the children, manage the businesses, keep the accounts, practice medicine, make art, write poetry, row the galleys, mine the silver, and die in the arena. The economy of Rome does not function without them. The lifestyle of every free Roman above the poverty line depends on the labor of people who have no legal personhood, who can be bought, sold, beaten, sexually exploited, and killed at their owner's discretion, and for whom the law, when it intervenes at all, intervenes to protect the owner's investment, not the slave's humanity.
Some slaves live better than free laborers. The educated Greek household slave, the trusted steward, the imperial bureaucrat who happens to be imperial property. Some earn money, buy their freedom, and become citizens within a generation. The system has a porousness that other slaveholding societies lacked. Manumission is common, freedom is achievable, and the children of freedmen are full citizens. But the porousness does not excuse the brutality. The mines are worked by slaves who do not survive their terms. The galleys are rowed by slaves chained to their oars. The great households run on a staff whose bodies do not belong to them. And in the arena, but the arena is tonight's last chapter, and we will get there in the dark.
One more face in the crowd deserves its paragraph, because she is everywhere, and the histories barely see her. The Roman woman.
Women in Rome occupy a legal and social position that is simultaneously more liberated
and more constrained than any simple sentence can capture. A Roman woman cannot vote, cannot hold public office, cannot practice law. She is legally under the authority of her father until marriage, and technically under the authority of her husband thereafter. Although by the late Republic and the imperial period, a form of marriage has emerged that leaves the woman under her father's authority rather than her husband's, which paradoxically gives her more independence. Her property remains her own. She can divorce at will, and if her father dies, she becomes legally autonomous, sui juris, her own person, in a way that women in many later centuries will not be.
In practice, Roman women run businesses, own property, commission buildings, patronize artists, manage estates, and exercise influence through every channel except the official ones. The graffiti of Pompeii include election endorsements signed by women. They cannot vote, but they campaign. The tombstones record female doctors, female merchants, female artisans. Eumachia, a businesswoman in Pompeii, built the largest building in the Forum with her own money and had her statue erected inside it. The legal framework says one thing, the lived reality says another, and the gap between them is filled with the same improvisation and determination that fills it in every society, that tells half its population to sit down and watch.
Walk on through the city and let the other structures announce themselves. The temples, one on nearly every corner, small and large, bright with paint. Because Roman buildings are not the white marble of museum reconstructions. They are painted in reds and blues and golds, gaudy and vivid and startling against the Mediterranean sky. The fountains, over 1,000 of them in the city, fed by the aqueducts, running constantly, providing free, clean water to every neighborhood. The aqueducts themselves, 11 of them by the 2nd century, delivering an estimated 1 million cubic meters of water per day, roughly 1,000 liters per person, a figure that compares favorably with modern cities. Rome's water supply is its proudest achievement. Frontinus, the water commissioner under Nerva, writes that the aqueducts are proof of Rome's greatness, far surpassing the useless pyramids of Egypt and the famous but impractical works of the Greeks. He has a point. The pyramids are magnificent and serve the dead. The aqueducts are functional and serve the living.
And then, around midday, the 6th hour by Roman timekeeping, which divides daylight into 12 equal hours regardless of the season, so that a summer hour is longer than a winter hour, and no 2 days have hours of the same length. The city begins to slow. The shops pull their shutters halfway. The noise drops a register. And you, along with most of the population, turn toward the place where Roman civilization reveals its strangest and most characteristic face.
You go to the baths.
Stop, though, in the Forum. Any forum, the city has several, because the Forum is where the Roman day reaches its noisiest and most bewildering pitch, and it deserves its own paragraph in your memory.
The Forum Romanum, the original, is small by the standards of the city it anchors. A rectangle of paved ground, roughly 250 meters long, lined with temples, law courts, government buildings, and shops. It is the Times Square, the Piccadilly Circus, the Shibuya crossing of the ancient world, a place where every function of civilization is conducted simultaneously, in public, at full volume. Lawyers argue cases on the steps of the basilica while a funeral procession passes through the Via Sacra below them. A senator canvasses voters beside a sausage cart. a priest sacrifices a bull, literally with a knife, and the blood runs into a gutter, while behind him, a money changer weighs coins on a bronze scale, and a tourist from Gaul stares at the Temple of Saturn with his mouth open.
The law courts alone would take a day to describe. Roman litigation is a spectator sport, conducted in the open, with audiences who cheer and jeer as if the advocates were gladiators, which in a rhetorical sense they are. Cicero's career was made not in a courtroom, but in a performance space, and the tradition holds. You can stand at the edge of a trial and listen to the best-trained speakers in the ancient world argue about property rights, murder, inheritance, and political conspiracy. And the crowd around you will have opinions, audible ones, about every point. Privacy, in Rome, is an aristocratic luxury and a modern assumption. Everything important happens in public.
And alongside the grand forums, the markets, Trajan's Markets, the world's first shopping mall, a multi-level complex of shops and offices rising behind the forum in a semicircular cascade of brick and concrete. 150 shops, selling everything from silk to sardines, connected by corridors and staircases that feel astonishingly like a modern commercial building. You walk through Trajan's Markets and something clicks in your head. This is not a ruin. This is a predecessor. The Romans did not invent commerce, but they industrialized it. They built the infrastructure of buying and selling at a scale and a density that the world would not see again until the 19th century. And one last thing about the streets before the day turns inward, the graffiti. Rome's walls talk, and they talk in a voice that the official sources never use.
The graffiti of Pompeii, preserved under the ash and applicable in spirit to Rome itself, are the uncensored diary of a city's inner life. Election slogans? The fruit sellers endorse Marcus Cyrenius for a dial. Love declarations. Successus the weaver loves the innkeeper's slave girl, whose name is Iris. Philosophical observations. Nothing can last forever. The sun once shone in splendor, then sank into the sea. Obscenities that would make a modern bathroom wall blush. Advertisements for gladiatorial games, including the fighters' records. Reviews of local taverns. Complaints about landlords. A simple, devastating sentence carved into a stone column. I wonder, O wall, that you have not yet collapsed. So many tedious writings do you bear. The Romans write on their walls the way the modern world writes on the internet. Compulsively, anonymously, in a torrent of opinion and wit and obscenity and loneliness. And the walls, like the internet, preserve all of it, without editing, without hierarchy, without mercy.
Stand in any Roman street and you are standing in a library of the unsaid. The things too small for history, too ordinary for literature, too human for the official record. A name scratched into plaster, a price chalked on a wall, a heart drawn beside a name that no one remembers. The city talks to itself constantly, on every surface, and the surfaces remember what the people forget.
The baths of Rome are not baths. They are a civilization's argument about what the body is for.
By the 2nd century, Rome has perhaps 800 bathhouses. From the vast imperial thermae of Trajan and later Caracalla, holding thousands of bathers at a time, to the small neighborhood balnea on every other block. Most charge a quadrans. The smallest Roman coin, a quarter of an as, roughly the cost of a cup of cheap wine. And many are free, subsidized by the emperor, or by local politicians buying goodwill. They are open to nearly everyone. Men and women, free and slave, citizen and foreigner. The hours are divided. Women in the morning, men in the afternoon, in most establishments. And the protocol is flexible, but the baths are, in practice,
the most democratic institution in the Roman world. The senator and the freed slave soak in the same pool, and while their social distance is maintained in 1,000 subtle ways, the water does not care.
You enter through the apodyterium, the changing room, where you strip and leave your clothes in a cubbyhole or hand them to a slave if you have one, or to a capsarius, a bath attendant, for a small fee. Theft is endemic. The poets joke about it, the law addresses it, and the sensible bather brings nothing valuable. You are now naked in a room full of other naked people, and no one blinks, because this is Rome, and the body in Rome is a public object in a way that will not be repeated in the West for 2,000 years.
The sequence in a full imperial bathhouse runs like this. The palastra first, the exercise yard open air, where men wrestle, throw balls, lift stone weights, run, or simply walk in circles talking about politics. Then the tepidarium, the warm room, gentle heat, where the body begins to open. Then the caldarium, the hot room, fierce and steaming, heated by a hypocaust system that passes hot air from a furnace through channels beneath the raised floor and behind the walls, turning the entire room into a low-temperature oven. You sweat profoundly. A slave or a hired attendant scrapes your skin with a strigil, a curved bronze blade, removing the oil and sweat and dirt in ribbons. This is how Rome cleans itself, not with soap, which exists but is considered a foreign oddity, but with oil and scraping. You are oiled before the bath, scraped during the bath, and oiled again after. The olive oil economy, once more, running through everything.
Then the frigidarium, the cold plunge, bracing and sudden, and the part that separates the committed bather from the tourist. Then, if you like, back to the tepidarium to warm down, or out to the gardens, because the great thermae are not just bathhouses. They are leisure complexes with libraries, lecture halls, sculpture galleries, and gardens. You can spend the entire afternoon at the baths. Many people do. The baths are Rome's living room, its gym, its library, its social club, its office, and its parliament of gossip. And the admission costs less than a loaf of bread.
Stay in the bathhouse a moment longer, because there is something here that goes beyond hygiene, something that explains why the baths matter to Roman identity in a way that transcends the physical.
The baths are where Romans are most fully Roman. The forum is for business. The temple is for gods. The arena is for spectacle. The bath is for being human, for the body as a social fact, for the pleasure of warmth and water and conversation, and the slow afternoon hours when the city's relentless noise drops to a murmur and the light comes through the high windows in shafts of steam and gold. The great thermae are beautiful, vaulted ceilings 60 feet high, mosaic floors depicting sea creatures and athletes and gods, walls sheathed in colored marble imported from every province of the empire, green porphyry from Greece, yellow giallo antico from Tunisia, purple-veined pavonaceto from Phrygia. You stand naked in a room more lavishly decorated than most palaces, and the admission cost less than a cup of wine. That is the Roman social contract in miniature. The state gives you water, grain, games, and beauty, and in return you accept the hierarchy, the slavery, the violence, and the emperor's face on every coin.
The baths are also where deals are made, secrets are traded, and careers are built or destroyed. Senators take their meetings poolside,
Businessmen entertain clients in the hot room. Poets recite their latest compositions to captive audiences who cannot politely leave because they are waist-deep in warm water. The younger Pliny complains about a poet who follows him from room to room, reciting through the changing room, the exercise yard, and into the plunge pool, where the verses echo off the vaulted ceiling and escape is impossible. Literary ambush in the frigidarium, only Rome could produce such a complaint.
And do not underestimate the social physics of nudity, because it recalibrates your understanding of the Roman relationship with the body in ways that matter. In the bath, the marks of status dissolve, but not entirely. The senator's body is oiled with expensive unguents. The laborer's is not. The rich man arrives with an entourage of slaves carrying his strigils, his oils, his towels, his snacks. The poor man arrives alone and scrapes himself. The freed slave's body may carry the scars of his former life, the brand, the whip marks, visible to everyone in the tepidarium, legible like a biography written on skin. Nakedness in Rome is not equality. It is equality's performance, played on a stage where everyone can read the real script underneath. And yet, the water is the same water. The heat is the same heat. And the conversation, echoing in the vaulted rooms, floats between the bodies without distinguishing their origins. Something happens in the baths that does not happen anywhere else in Rome. The city forgets, for an hour, the hierarchy it spends the rest of the day enforcing. It remembers it the moment the toga goes back on, but the hour matters. And here, in the steam and the scraping, is where we must talk about the thing that would actually kill you. Because the baths, for all their splendor, are a window into the terrifying gap between Roman engineering and Roman medicine.
The Romans build aqueducts of breathtaking precision. They heat buildings from beneath the floor. They supply 1 million people with running water. And they have absolutely no theory of infectious disease. None. Germ theory is 18 centuries away. The prevailing medical framework, inherited from the Greeks, refined by Galen, the most influential physician of the age, holds that illness results from an imbalance of the 4 humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Treatment consists of restoring the balance: bloodletting, purging, dietary adjustment, herbal remedies, and prayer. Some of it works accidentally. Much of it does nothing. Some of it kills faster than the disease.
Now consider the baths through that lens. The hot pool is shared by hundreds of people daily, many of them sick because the baths are recommended as therapy for nearly every complaint. The water is warm, standing, and infrequently changed. The strigils scrape open the skin. The changing rooms are crowded. The latrines, shared, communal, social, feature a common sponge on a stick, rinsed in a channel of running water used by one patron and passed to the next. The tersorium it is called, and it is exactly as unhygienic as it sounds. The baths of Rome are paradoxically both the most civilized and the most epidemiologically dangerous public spaces in the ancient world.
Life expectancy in Rome, the average, including infant mortality, is somewhere around 25 to 30 years. Exclude the children who die in infancy, and roughly a quarter do, and a Roman who survives to age 10 can expect to reach perhaps 45 or 50. The diseases that do the killing are the diseases of density: tuberculosis, malaria. The Pontine marshes breed it, and the city sits downstream. Typhoid, dysentery, and the periodic plagues that sweep through a population with no concept of quarantine and no understanding of transmission. The Antonine Plague, possibly smallpox, will arrive within decades of your mourning and kill perhaps 5 million people across the empire. The city you are standing in is a marvel of engineering wrapped around a biological time bomb, and nobody, not the doctors, not the priests, not the emperor, knows it.
And the teeth. Let us talk about the teeth, because they tell the story in miniature. Roman bread, the staple food, is ground on stone mills. Stone dust gets into the flour. Stone dust gets into the bread. Stone dust grinds down the enamel of every person who eats it, which is everyone, every day, from childhood. By 30, a Roman's teeth are worn to nubs. By 40, many are gone. Dental pain is treated with clove oil, if you are lucky, and extraction with iron pliers, if you are not. There is no anesthesia beyond wine and poppy, and the poppy is not always available. The toothache is the most democratic suffering in Rome. It comes for the emperor and the slave alike, and neither of them has any defense that works. And yet, and this is the paradox that makes Rome genuinely great, the thing that earns the word civilization. The same culture that shares a sponge on a stick also builds the most advanced surgical instruments the world has seen. Archaeologists have found Roman forceps, scalpels, bone levers, catheters, and vaginal specula that would be recognizable in a modern operating theater. Roman military surgeons routinely perform amputations, remove arrowheads, and set compound fractures. In the field without anesthesia, with survival rates that astonish modern historians. Celsus describes cataract surgery in technical detail that was not improved upon for 15 centuries. The paradox is real. This is a civilization that can remove a cataract and cannot boil its water. That can set a broken femur and does not know what causes malaria. That builds hospitals, valetudinaria, for soldiers and, later, for civilians, and fills them with patients whose humors are being balanced by physicians who have never seen a bacterium and never will.
The gap is not stupidity. It is the specific blindness of every age, including ours, the things that are obvious to later centuries and invisible to the one living through them. The Romans see what their framework allows them to see, patterns of diet and climate and temperament. They cannot see what their framework does not contain. Organisms too small for the naked eye, transmitted by mechanisms no one has theorized. They die in their millions of things they could have prevented if they had known to look. But they do not know to look, and so the aqueducts carry clean water into the city, and the sewers carry waste out of it, and in between, in the baths and the fountains, and the shared cups of the taverns, the invisible world does its work unobserved.
There are a few more things the body endures in Rome that deserve their moment, because they are the things that separate the tourist from the resident.
Lead. The Romans love lead. They line their water pipes with it. The word plumbing comes from plumbum, the Latin for lead. They use lead vessels to boil grape juice into defrutum, a sweet syrup that flavors wine and food. And the acidity of the grape juice leaches lead from the vessel into the syrup, with an efficiency that a modern chemist would call alarming. They use lead in cosmetics. Lead-based white face powder is the foundation of Roman beauty for women, and occasionally, men. They use lead acetate as a sweetener, sugar of lead, they call it, adding it to wine when honey is too expensive. The cumulative lead exposure of an urban Roman is, by modern standards, catastrophic.
Skeletal analysis of Roman-era bones shows lead levels 10 to 100 times higher than pre-industrial baselines. The symptoms: cognitive decline, infertility, kidney damage, irritability, abdominal pain, are described in the medical literature of the period without anyone connecting them to the material that lines every pipe and sweetens every cup.
And the children. Let us not leave Rome without acknowledging what happens to the children, because it is the hardest thing for a modern person to absorb. Infant exposure, the practice of leaving a newborn outside, usually at a designated spot, to be collected by whoever wants it or to die, is legal, practiced, and discussed in the philosophical literature with a calmness that stops the breath. A father has the legal right to accept or reject a newborn. He lifts the child from the ground in a ritual gesture of acceptance, or he does not, and the child is taken away. Some exposed children are collected and raised. As slaves, usually, some are not collected. The rate is unknown and debated, but the practice is real, and it is not confined to the poor. Even wealthy families expose children who are disabled, female beyond the desired number, or simply inconvenient. It is the darkest page in Rome's daily ledger, and it is written by people who build aqueducts and recite Virgil and believe themselves civilized, because civilization, in every age, includes the things it cannot bear to look at and does anyway. The sun is dropping. The baths are closing. The city is about to perform its daily transformation, from a city of people to a city of wheels, and you need to eat.
Dinner. The cena is the main meal of the Roman day, and for most Romans it happens where breakfast happened, at the Thermopolium counter, or at a popina, a slightly more ambitious tavern with benches and a back room. The food is better than you expect and stranger than you imagine. A bowl of pulse. Thick wheat porridge, the ancestral food of Rome, flavored with whatever the cook has. Cheese, eggs, honey, herbs. Or a plate of beans and sausage. Or lentil stew with ham. The food of working Rome is Mediterranean peasant cuisine. Legumes, grains, olive oil, cheap wine, seasonal vegetables, very little meat. And it is, by modern nutritional standards, surprisingly sound if you ignore the lead in the wine jugs and the stone dust in the bread.
The wine. Always the wine. Romans drink wine the way modern people drink coffee, constantly, universally, as a baseline assumption of daily life. But they do not drink it straight. Straight wine is considered barbaric, the mark of an alcoholic or a foreigner, which in Roman eyes are often the same thing. Wine is mixed with water, usually 2 or 3 parts water to 1 part wine, and often flavored with honey, with spices, with seawater, with pine resin. The cheapest wine, Posca, a sour vinegar wine that soldiers drink, costs almost nothing. The best, Falernian, from Campania, costs a fortune and is aged for decades. The average Roman drinks something in between, a rough, resinous table wine that would make a modern sommelier weep, and that constitutes, given the state of Rome's water supply, a safer beverage than what comes out of the public fountain.
If you are invited to a patron's dinner, the formal cena, the experience is another world entirely. You recline on a couch, 3 to a couch, leaning on your left elbow, eating with your right hand. Slaves bring courses, appetizers of eggs and olives and salads dressed with garum. The fermented fish sauce that Romans put on everything, their ketchup, their soy sauce, produced in factories along the Spanish and African coasts and shipped across the empire in clay amphorae that archaeologists find in staggering numbers. Then the main courses, roasted meats, grilled fish, vegetable dishes elaborate beyond modern expectation. Then desserts, fruit, pastry, honeyed nuts.
The meal lasts hours. Conversation is expected. Wit is valued. Poetry is recited. Arguments about philosophy are conducted between the mullet and the pears. The formal dinner is Rome's theater of friendship, rivalry, obligation, and display. And it is an exhausting performance, even when the food is good.
A word about garum. Because garum is the taste of Rome, the single flavor that if you could bottle and bring home would summon the entire city in a single drop.
Garum is fermented fish sauce, the guts and blood and small whole fish of anchovies, sardines or mackerel, layered with salt in stone vats, left in the sun for weeks or months, stirred occasionally, and strained into a clear amber liquid that smells, to the uninitiated, like something has gone catastrophically wrong, and tastes, once you get past the smell, of a deep, rich, salty umami that amplifies everything it touches. It is Rome's soy sauce, its Worcestershire, its MSG, used on meat, fish, vegetables, eggs, bread, lentils, and, in the sweetened version called oenogarum, mixed with wine and spices, on desserts. The factories line the coasts of Spain, Portugal, North Africa, and the Black Sea. The product is shipped in distinctive narrow-necked amphorae that archaeologists find in every corner of the empire, from Scotland to Syria. The best grades, Garum sociorum from Cartagena in Spain, cost as much as fine perfume. The cheapest grades, Alec, the sludgy residue, cost almost nothing and go into everything.
You taste it at your first meal and do not know what it is. By your third meal, you are adding it yourself. By the end of the week, food without it tastes flat, empty, missing a dimension you cannot name. That is Rome's trick. Not just the buildings and the roads and the laws, but the small daily things, the taste on the bread, the oil on the skin, the sound of Latin in the street, that enter you before you notice, and become, without permission, the texture of your life.
But we should not leave Rome, not tonight, without visiting the place that defines it in the imagination of every age that followed, the arena.
The Colosseum, or as the Romans know it, the Flavian Amphitheater, seats 50,000 people. It fills on game days with a cross-section of the entire city. Senators in the front rows, equestrians behind them, citizens above, women and slaves at the top. Admission is free. The games are sponsored by the emperor or by ambitious politicians, and the tickets are distributed through the patronage networks you navigated this morning. The awning, the velarium, a vast canvas shade operated by a detachment of sailors, protects the audience from the sun. Water mists are sprayed. Perfume is diffused. Food vendors work the aisles. The logistics are, as with everything Roman, astonishing. The building can be filled in 15 minutes and emptied in 10, through 80 entrances designed with a crowd flow intelligence that modern stadium architects have studied and borrowed.
And then the killing begins.
The morning program. The Vena shown is the beast hunts. Animals, lions, bears, leopards, elephants, crocodiles, ostriches, imported from every corner of the empire and beyond, are released into the arena and killed by professional hunters, or made to fight each other, or used to execute condemned criminals in ways that the program describes with the euphemism of mythology. A man dressed as Orpheus is torn apart by a bear. A woman playing a mythological role is assaulted by a bull. The crowd watches. The crowd cheers. The crowd eats its lunch.
The midday program. The executions. Condemned criminals, murderers, arsonists, deserters, and increasingly, in later decades, Christians are killed publicly, by sword, by fire, by beast, by each other.
This is not entertainment in the Roman mind. This is justice, made visible, made communal, made theatrical. The crowd is witnessing the law's authority, not merely a death, although the distinction from the floor of the arena is academic.
The afternoon program, the gladiators. And here the reality departs from the movie version in ways that matter. Gladiators are professionals, trained, expensive, and not killed casually. A good gladiator represents an investment comparable to a modern racehorse. Years of training, specialized diet, medical care, and a fan following that generates revenue. Gladiatorial combat is regulated, refereed, and more often survived than not. Scholars estimate that a gladiator in the imperial period had roughly a 1 in 10 chance of dying in any given bout. The fights are real, the blood is real, the danger is real, but the wholesale slaughter of popular imagination is, for the professionals, an exaggeration. The expendable ones, the prisoners, the condemned, the untrained, are a different story, and their story is the one the arena prefers not to tell too loudly.
You watch. Of course you watch. Everyone watches. The philosopher Seneca, who despises the games, goes to the games. He writes about it. The shame of watching, the fascination of watching, the impossibility of not watching, in terms that anyone who has ever consumed media they knew was harmful will recognize instantly. The arena is Rome's mirror. The engineering is magnificent, the logistics are genius, and the thing it was built to do is kill people for entertainment. That is the sentence Rome writes on itself, and no amount of aqueducts redeems it.
But the arena is not Rome's only evening entertainment, and the other options tell you something gentler about the city, something the arena's shadow tends to blot out.
The theater. Rome has several permanent theaters and an appetite for spectacle that extends well beyond blood. The comedies of Plautus and Terence, bawdy, clever, full of scheming slaves and confused lovers and mistaken identities, play to packed houses and have been playing in revivals and adaptations for 2 centuries by your time. The pantomimus, a solo dancer performing mythological stories to orchestral accompaniment, wordless, gymnastic, emotional, is the pop star of the Roman entertainment world. The great pantomime dancers have fans, groupies, and political patrons, and their performances provoke riots of enthusiasm that the authorities periodically try to suppress and never succeed. The races at the Circus Maximus, chariot racing, holding 250,000 spectators, the largest sports venue ever built, are Rome's true national obsession. The factions, the greens and the blues and the reds and the whites, command loyalties that make modern football rivalries look restrained.
And the quieter pleasures, the taverns, capone, popene, where working Romans drink their watered wine, play dice and board games. Itabula, an ancestor of backgammon, is everywhere. Argue about the races, and occasionally start fights that bring the vigiles. The gardens, Rome has public gardens, some of them vast, on the hills and along the river, open to everyone, quiet in the evenings, fragrant with Mediterranean plantings that thrive in the mild climate. And the libraries, 28 public libraries by the 4th century, free and open, where a citizen or a freedman can sit and read a scroll of Virgil or Ovid or Lucretius, copied by hand, stored in pigeonhole shelving, available to anyone who asks. Rome is not only the arena, it is also the library. Both are free. Both are Rome.
Night falls, and the city changes voice.
The wheeled traffic ban lifts at sunset, and within an hour the streets that were rivers of people become rivers of carts. Supply wagons, construction timber, marble blocks, amphorae of wine and oil and grain. The entire logistics chain that feeds a city of 1 million arrives in the dark, hauled by mules and oxen over basalt paving stones, and the noise is indescribable. The iron-rimmed wheels on stone produce a grinding, rumbling roar that Juvenal compares to a herd of cattle being driven through a marble hallway. Sleep, he says, costs money in Rome. Only the rich, in their villas on the hills, away from the streets, behind thick garden walls, can afford it. You, on the 3rd floor of an insula, cannot afford it. You endure.
And the fire is the thing that follows you into sleep and never quite lets go.
Rome burns. Rome has always burned. Rome will always burn. The city is a forest of timber-framed buildings, heated by charcoal braziers, lit by open-flame oil lamps, and packed so tightly that a fire on one block can cross a street in minutes. The Great Fire of 64 AD, Nero's fire, destroyed 10 of 14 districts and burned for 6 days. But the Great Fire is not the real danger. The real danger is the small fire, the nightly fire, the fire that starts in a ground-floor bakery, or a fullery furnace, or a dropped lamp on a 5th-floor landing, and eats upward through a building, while the residents on the upper floors discover that the only stairway is already full of smoke. The vigils, Rome's fire brigade, also its police, patrol the streets at night with buckets, axes, and pumps, and they are, for their age, remarkable. But the buildings burn faster than the vigils can respond, and the water pressure in the upper floors is 0, and the escape routes are the same narrow stairs you carried your chamber pot down this morning.
You lie on your rope-strung bed. The oil lamp is out. You cannot afford to burn it all night, and in any case, it frightens you now in a way it did not this morning. The room is dark. Through the walls, the thin, shared, uninsulated walls, you hear your neighbor cough, turn, cough again. Through the window, the city roars, the wagons, the shouting drivers, the mules, the crash of something heavy being unloaded. Somewhere, always somewhere, the distant sound of singing or fighting or both. And somewhere else, maybe close, maybe not, the smell of smoke that may be a brazier and may be the end of the building, and you do not know which, and you lie still, and you breathe, and the lamp is out, and the room smells of olive oil, and the ceiling crack is invisible in the dark, and the little plant growing through it is silent above you. And Rome, the greatest city on earth, the center of the world, the empire that will stand forever, roars and rattles and burns around you, and does not care whether you sleep.
One last thought before the lamp goes out. Because you are lying here, in the dark, in Rome, and the question hangs in the smoky air above you, was it worth it?
The modern mind wants a verdict. Thumbs up, thumbs down. The gesture is Roman, after all. Was Rome great? Was Rome terrible? And the honest answer, from the 3rd floor of an insula at 2 in the morning, with the wagons grinding below and the neighbors coughing through the walls, is, yes, both, simultaneously, inseparably. Rome gave the world roads, law, concrete, public health infrastructure, the arch, the dome, the concept of citizenship,
the Latin language from which half of Europe's tongues descend, and a model of administrative governance that every subsequent empire has studied and borrowed. Rome also gave the world industrialized slavery, spectacle killing as entertainment, imperial wars of conquest that depopulated entire regions, and a class system so rigid that a man could build an aqueduct that serves 1 million people and go home to a household staffed by human beings he legally owns.
The two are not separate achievements. They are the same achievement, the same energy, the same organizational genius, the same terrifying confidence that the world exists to be shaped by Roman hands. The aqueduct and the arena are built by the same engineers, funded by the same treasury, maintained by the same slaves. You cannot admire the one and ignore the other. You can only stand in the building they both support. This insula, this cracked ceiling, olive oil smelling, fire-prone, astonishing building, and acknowledge that you are inside a civilization, and that civilizations are not verdicts. They are weather systems. They contain everything.
The city has been doing this for centuries before you arrived, and will do it for centuries after you leave. The emperors change, the buildings fall and rise, the chamber pot goes down the stairs every morning, and the sponge is passed from hand to hand, and the bread grinds the teeth, and the aqueducts pour clean water into a city that does not know what clean means. Not really, not in the way that would save it. And the people of Rome live in it, all of it, the magnificent and the appalling, braided together so tightly that you cannot have the aqueducts without the arena, the baths without the sponge, the engineering without the slavery, the poetry without the lead.
That is Rome. Not the marble, not the legions, not the togaed senators or the cinematic gladiators. Just this. A room on the 3rd floor, a lamp gone out, a crack in the ceiling, and a city that never, ever stops.
Close your eyes. You are in Rome tonight, and Rome will still be here in the morning.
Sleep well.